Hello, and welcome to the Off the Grid Clubhouse. I am your host, Amelia Fruby, and this is our private podcast and newsletter for friends, fans, and super fans of Off the Grid leaving social media. Today, I have a very special free episode here in the Clubhouse. We don't do this very often, except when I want to feature really amazing people. And in this one, we will be featuring my favorite feminist founder, Becky Mollenkamp. Becky has just published, like a few days ago as this is coming out, her new book, Liberate Your Business, a radical guide for entrepreneurs building inside a broken system. Becky was kind enough to send me an early copy of this, and I read it like in one sitting when I was on a flight. I was like underlining everything on my Kindle. I was so excited to see everything Becky was weaving together here, and I just knew that Off the Grid listeners would love this book and be as excited about it as I am. So in this conversation, Becky and I are going to talk a little bit about her book, about how to liberate your business, and about a very special event we have coming up together on May 20th. So before we do any of that, I really want to encourage you to go buy a copy of the book. The website is linked in the show notes, and Becky has even been kind enough to make us a special discount code. So if you use the code Amelia, Amelia, all caps, you can get $5 off your book purchase on Becky's website. So head to the show notes and do that. And then while you're there, you can also RSVP for our free book club, which is happening May 20th. We're going to have a really lovely community chat on Zoom. I'll talk to Becky a bit more about the book. We will take listener questions. It's going to be a lovely time. So this episode is just a preview. It's just a taste, a little appetizer of all of the goodness we're going to get into with Becky this month. And all of that said, hi, Becky. Welcome to the Clubhouse.
Hi, let's call it an appetizer. Yeah, that was bad. And also, you didn't mention you're in the book, Amelia.
Oh, yes. I literally, when I was reading the first time, I had completely forgotten this. I was like, because we did it over email, it was, it was just like another thing I was doing in my inbox. I literally got to the part where I'm there and I was like, me.
Hopefully you weren't like, wait a minute, she never said this, because I swear I got your permission. Consent is important.
You absolutely got my permission. We totally did this together. But yes, I'm on page 88, and I love how you wove interviews and other voices into your book. It feels like a real way of putting everything you talk about the book into practice. So let's start just with kind of where the book began. I'm so curious. Could you tell listeners a little bit about where did the idea for this book come from, and why now? Why was this the moment that you needed to write this book?
Well, I'm going to reveal my age. I'm 51, but at the time of writing this, I was 50. And so part of it was I always wanted to write a book, and 50 feels like a big milestone. I was like, I want to write a book by the time I'm 50. Well, I was already 50, but I thought if I do it before I turn 51, then it sort of counts of writing a book by 50. Mm-hmm. So that was part of it, was just like that feeling that I think many people, as we age, whatever your milestones are, where you start to feel that tug of like, have I done the things I wanted to do? The book talks about legacy, and it did feel like a bit like that for me, just feeling that desire to have some legacy, leave something behind, leave something that lives beyond me besides my child, which he's wonderful, but I wanted something in this business space, this part of my life, because my professional part of my life has been such an important part of my life. So that's part of the reason for the timing. As far as what the book's about, part of it is I read a lot of business books. I used to. I've been actually reading fewer business books, but so many of them to me fall kind of on these two extremes. One of the systems are all broken anyway, so you might as well get yours, kind of that, how rich can you get? You got to get your piece of the pie kind of thing. Or this other extreme, which is more where I sit, which would be the system's really broken, we need to build a new system. And I agree with that. And yet, for many of us, those two extremes don't work. One, because our value set doesn't allow us to say, well, if everything's broken, I'll just get mine. But then we also live inside of a real world where we can't just say, well, let's just build a completely new system. I would love that. And yet I have to pay my mortgage, right? I have to make money so that I can pay the bills. So what does it look like to say, I want to run a business that actually feels okay inside my body, that doesn't leave me at the end of the night feeling icky, but also allows me to pay the bills and function in this broken system that I'm in. And I had a hard time finding those kinds of books. And that's really the space that I want to occupy, is because I am a little too realist to be a total idealist, but I'm definitely too much of an idealist to be a nihilist completely and just give up. And so it's sort of like just writing the book I want, because as my friend and business partner and also featured in the book, Faith Clark, says, the medicine we give is usually the medicine we need. And that's the medicine I needed. And so it was like, I'm going to write this thing.
Yeah, I appreciate you walking us through that. And I love that on the back cover copy for the book, you call it a deprogramming manual. And that felt so clear and true to me. And it comes through in the story that you share of your own career throughout the book. So, I didn't start with your bio here, but you have a master's degree in communications. You worked in journalism for 20 years, particularly at places we might recognize like Better Homes and Gardens. And then you moved into content marketing and then eventually into coaching, and particularly working as a feminist business coach. And I think that your book really speaks to that journey of deprogramming, from being like, I will succeed at the traditional norms of career. I will like pass every milestone. I will check every box, and realizing like you've built something that feels bad and doesn't work. The things I always talk about with social media, right? Like, how does it feel and is it working? And I talk about that in social media, but in the book, you talk a little bit how like that's the career for you. Like, you had been on this path and then it felt bad and it wasn't working ultimately for what you needed to be a like happy and well person. And then you had to unravel that to build something different. And so you move into self-employment, but realize you're just building the same old thing again. And then you're able to really kind of reimagine what your business can be, how it can look for you. And so I think this book is so powerful for anyone who has found themselves climbing a corporate ladder or found themselves building a business that just like isn't it, or that just like is as harmful to them as having a job ever was. And then Liberate Your Business can come in and like totally rewrite the story on what that can be for them. So how did you begin your own process of rewriting your self-employment journey? I just gave the highlights of your career, but maybe you want to take us to kind of some of the moments you talk about in the book where you're like, oh, here's where I realized it wasn't working, and here's how I started to change my path.
Yeah, for anyone who's worried that it's like a memoir, it's not, just to be clear. I weave in very small doses of my story at the beginning of each chapter just to kind of help people place themselves in some of this stuff, to see themselves in it and relate to, oh, I know that feeling. But definitely it's not just my story. But I do share in little bits throughout where you get this glimpse of exactly what you said of me. And I reference Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, because it really resonated with me. It always has, because I did feel a bit like I built this gilded cage for myself. It was, everything looked really beautiful and the door was wide open. I could have gotten out, but I didn't feel like I could. I felt very trapped inside of this cage that I had created myself. And sometimes it's almost harder when you build it yourself, because then it's like, I did this, so I should be happy inside here. And why am I not? And there were sort of two key moments that I talk about that really changed things for me. One was 2010, when my brother died of a heroin overdose. At the same time, I was beginning the process of separating and eventually divorcing. It was a lot in a short amount of time in my life. And it was such a wake-up call, because I was already starting to feel, and the reason my marriage was beginning to end was because I had been starting to feel that, why am I not happy inside of this, right? Everything looks so good on paper. I've built this beautiful on paper life that other people look and say, wow, you travel all the time. You've got, beautiful new home and a shiny BMW, and, you're living the life. Your husband's a nice guy and you have a job that seems so impressive. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't happy. And that's a really lonely place to be, when everyone around you is telling you should be happy and you start to feel guilty that you don't feel happy, because there's nothing you can point to say, well, this is it. I just knew none of it felt like me. But that's a really hard thing to articulate. But when my brother died, it was like the wake-up call that I needed, that life is way too short. I cannot just be happy with a good on paper life. I want a life that actually reflects what I want, which began a big unraveling because I didn't know what I wanted. I'd never asked myself that question. I was 35 years old and had never really sat with, what do I want my life to be? From 9 years old, I said I was going to be a writer. I was just on this path that like a 9-year-old had decided for me, and that I was too proud and too vain and too a lot of things to ever really question. And so I just kept doing it for all the reasons, being the good girl. And I talk about a lot of those in there. So that was the first moment of sort of my internal work of undoing a lot of this and starting to really sit with, what do I want my life to look like? What do I actually want to do? There was some humbling of myself moving back home at 37 and things like that. The next moment came in 2014 when Michael Brown was murdered a half a mile from my doorstep in Ferguson. And I remember that moment of seeing people angry enough to be setting things on fire. I could see the fires from my house. And knowing that I was thinking, this is awful. I feel that too. I feel this is wrong and awful. Why am I not feeling it enough that I want to be out on the streets, right? Sort of having to sit with myself and my feminism to wonder why I was feeling like, yeah, that sucks, but not anything much deeper than that. And doing my own research, I was a journalist, so I did a lot of research, started to understand the realities of what it means to be Black in St. Louis. And it took that for me to start to sit with privilege and to understand, identify, be with, recognize my privilege. And I started doing that kind of work on myself then. And then eventually that led to that place of, wait a minute, I've done all of this work on knowing what I want, of understanding my role in these systems and what these systems are in so much of my life. And yet here's this big part of my life, my business, where I've almost treated it as its own thing that's separate from all that work, right? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because my work takes up a lot of my life. And so why am I not applying some of these same lessons to this? So that sort of after 2014, doing all the work myself, that was where I started to put that same lens onto both how I do my coaching and then how I run my business.
I know there's so many examples in the book, but I'm just wondering here, could you talk a little bit about one or two of the shifts you made in your coaching and maybe a few other examples more structurally in your business that were a result of that realization?
Yeah. I mean, the place I really started was in my coaching, which is good because it was where I was probably causing the most harm. At that time, I was a quote unquote mindset coach. It's what I called myself. Like so many of the well-meaning white ladies that I still see that are very much in that same place of trying to help people if they could just fix their mindsets, if they could just think better thoughts, if they could manifest it, they can make more happen for themselves. And I was causing harm without realizing it. I didn't understand because I wasn't understanding that you can't mindset your way. You can't just change your thoughts and suddenly racism doesn't exist, sexism doesn't exist, homophobia doesn't exist. These things exist regardless of how we feel or think about them, right? That is a structural reality. And when we start telling people, giving them, whether it is explicit or implicit, the idea that their problems are because of how they're thinking about the things around them, how they're feeling about the world around them, instead of the problem being the world around them, we are harming them. We are causing a lot of harm. And I caused harm, which is a really hard thing to sit with too when we go through some of this work. Most especially for those of us with the most privilege, the recognition that we have caused harm because we were unaware, not maliciously causing harm, right? But that we unintentionally caused harm. And I had to sit with some of that stuff. And from there, it's like you can either let that shame shut you down or you can use that as a powerful tool to create change. And that was what I tried to do. So first of all, I stopped calling myself a mindset coach because I recognized that while there is truth to, we have individual work we need to do and can do. We have things inside of our control. We have agency over a lot of things. The idea of a mindset coach tends to be very reductive and make people start to believe that everything's about their mindset. If I can manifest it, I can make it happen without integrating any of these other discussions. So my work really became with clients and helping to talk about what are some of the systemic issues at play here. What is and is not inside of your control. And instead of it just being about shifting their thoughts, it also became a lot of like grief work, not trauma work, to be clear, because I am not a therapist, but also just honoring the grief and the reality of living inside of broken systems and the real harm and pain that can cause. And instead of taking that on as a personal failure, helping clients start to separate that out. What if this is actually me versus what is the systems and not my fault and not something I have to feel bad about? That really radically shifted everything about how I work with clients. As far as my business, it looks a little more, well, first of all, I started shutting my laptop more often and not just working all the time, right? Because I recognized I was treating myself like the bosses I've had who expected me to work a lot more than I needed to, or to be creative during certain hours or whatever that might look like. So I started putting a lot more boundaries around my own time. And on the outward facing stuff, it also looked like really shifting the way I market my business, looking for those points where I was using things like false urgency, false scarcity to try, some of that manipulative sort of languaging that we've all been taught, and it works, but is it how I want to show up? Also introduced equitable pricing to most of my offers that allow people to see their privilege and or marginalizations and opt in to the place that makes sense for them based on those. So those are a few of the things. I mean, there's so much that's changed about my business, but yeah, that's a few of the things I've done.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think it's really helpful, especially when we're thinking about like liberation and business. And so much of your book is about looking at systemic issues and struggles and understanding ourselves differently in those contexts. And I think that, I love that type of high level work. And also it's like the actual practical actions we take in response to or resistance to those systems are where it comes into our business, right? There's the personal, there's the systemic, but then our business is a structure we're building in the midst of that, right? Like it's not just us. The business isn't just you, but it's also, for most of us, not a systemic force, right? Like we're not running the Amazons of the world that are at a scale that like reshape systems. We're trying to carve out space for a structure that can be and feel liberatory amidst all of this, and not just liberatory for ourselves as individuals, because that is really just like, the cash grab capitalism, get rich quick businesses that are like, it made me free, but like probably harmed a lot of other people in the process. And how do we do that? And how do we make space for that? So I think it's nice, like the way that you're always both pointing us toward the systems and offering practical actions that we can take to deprogram and to build otherwise. Because the way you positioned the book at the beginning was sort of like, well, we're not just getting rich quick, and also we're not doing a totally different thing. But I think this book has so many pathways for doing a totally different thing. I mean, it's not claiming that like our businesses themselves dismantle capitalism, but I saw so many possibilities in these pages for ways that we can work against it very radically. So I think it's there too, for what it's worth.
Thank you. There are a lot of changes that we can make, sometimes very small, sometimes much larger, that allow us to sort of push back against or refuse some of the things that happen inside the system. My hope is that it functions as more of a choose your own adventure kind of a book, in a way of like, I don't expect that anyone's going to do them all. I can't do them all, right? We have to sort of figure out what are the things we can do, and then maybe we opt for some others later and then more, because we can't just do it all overnight. You and I have come down in different places on AI right now, and I think that's part of what this book, I hope, offers, is that not everyone can do all the right things. Like there is no being perfect inside an imperfect system. Yeah. It's trying to figure out what does work for you. And I think being conscious and aware and making intentional choices.
This is also something I like about being a business owner and having a business is like, while I am one person and I always try to remain congruent between my personal life and my business life, there are also different kind of playgrounds for me, right? Like there are things that I won't do in the realm of off the grid or softer sounds that I'm okay with in my personal life. I'm thinking about this a lot with Substack right now, because I'm preparing to remove the Clubhouse off of Substack onto another platform, still a little bit to be determined which one. I'm figuring it out. And like, I'm doing that because of the stated values of off the grid. But in my personal life, like, is Substack a problem for me? Do I have any issues with being there? Like, not as much. It actually feels, I kind of feel okay. It's different. And I think that this is also a place where it's like, sometimes when I work with people who are really invested in like creating a different world, who have very radical politics, we talk about like, what are the different realms of your life? How are you reshaping things in your household? How are you reshaping things in your local community? How are you reshaping things in your business? Because they all have different people involved and different things are at stake. And I think there's space to maneuver. And so, yes, absolutely. Like, I actually think if someone tried to do every single thing in this book, one, you'd get burned out. And two, to be honest, I don't know that you'd have a business, like, because this isn't a guide to how to have a business. This is not like create offerings, set up your pricing. Like, that's not what it is. It's a guide to looking at the business that you have and then picking focus areas where you're going to rework the values, where you're going to deprogram some of it. And yeah, it's kind of like if you deprogram everything, you're not part of the program anymore.
Yeah, and 100%, I think you're right. Like, I really tried very hard to walk that strange line of all of that and make it clear that I'm not judging people for the choices they make either, because that's exactly why the cover says it's a broken system. There is only so much that we can all do, right? We have to acknowledge the reality of where we are right now. Would I love things to look completely different? Yeah, I mean, my politics are, I'm a socialist. I can't have the business that I want to have inside of the system that I live in, because it would look entirely different inside of a socialist system, but I don't live in that. Here's the reality of where I am. And I could say, well, I'm going to pick up tomorrow, move to a socialist country, but that's not realistic. And it also doesn't work with where I'm at in life and everything else. So how do I make choices where I can that reflect my values, while really making sure that I am truly asking myself the questions that allow me to be more honest with myself about where I can? Because I think that is also a piece where, especially those with the most privilege, sometimes can convince themselves that maybe there are choices they can't make where maybe they actually could. And for me, again, everything always starts at awareness. So I really want to start with awareness. And then once we have the awareness, then there becomes more intention. And if you are aware, like with Substack, as an example, we're both using Substack for the moment. We both are now aware of, I've been aware of problems with Substack for a long time. And wrestling with those, just because I become aware doesn't mean I immediately change my behaviors. I have the awareness, and now I can intentionally start to make choices. And for now, my intentional choice is that I'm remaining. Why? For a lot of reasons. One is finances. It's the only place I have yet to find where I can be there without having to spend money. Everywhere that I want to email people, it's going to cost a lot of money. But secondly, for now, I am still trying to operate under this belief that maybe if enough folks actually try to break the system from within, we can affect change. I'm getting closer to thinking that's not possible. And so I am, like you, starting to evaluate where might I be able to move. But I have the awareness, and that's the key piece, is like I'm not operating through this place of just blissfully unaware of the problems, but I'm also not making rash decisions without thinking them through. There's that intentionality. And then we get to the place of more informed action. And that's kind of what I hope for people to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I never subscribe to urgency in shifts like this. You know, I told people I was leaving Substack, I think in like February of this year, but I don't actually plan to do it until August probably. I was very clear, like this is something I know I want to do, and also the next 6 months of my life are wild, and I'm not going to put this on top of myself. And also, like, there are things that are urgent in life, but what tech platform you send your emails from is not one of them. That's my belief.
And I agree, because they're all flawed. I mean, almost all of these systems, or the tools that we use, are flawed for the same reasons that we're talking about, because they're operating inside of a broken system, right? And so it is very, I just always want to push back a little bit on this like perfectionist ideal, even inside of progressive movements that know that this perfectionism stuff is a product of white supremacy, and yet you still see it coming up where it's like, well, you're not being a perfect activist, you're not running your business in the perfect way. I know I'm not. Right? So I'm not putting myself up as a role model of what a perfectly liberated business looks like. My hope is that I am slowly moving myself closer in a way that also allows me to still pay my bills, still take care of myself and my family, not burn myself out, because none of that helps either, right? So how do we do that in those slow incremental ways?
And something I think a lot about is like, what are the areas where I do hold the line and I find total alignment? And then there are other areas where I don't, right? So that's where, like, through the project of Off the Grid and the business of Off the Grid, it's like, well, not using social media is the line there. So if I have to make frustrating or challenging changes like I am right now, like, I will do that, because this is a space where, like, that's the thing I hold true to. Other areas of that business, like, we don't have sliding scale. There's certainly like financial equity or accessibility things I could do in that business that I'm not doing, right? Because it's not that like every single aspect of it is deprogrammed or fixed or as radical as possible. It's also an ecosystem, right? So there are so many different elements that go into a business. But again, businesses are places that we can build worlds, and that's what makes them such beautiful sites for liberation. So I wanted to go into part of the book where you talk a little more about money and what you call the six-figure lie, because I think a big part of deprogramming a business, it's not just like understanding the systems or changing the practices. It's also about like letting go of the false promises and the like pictures that were painted for you as possible and realizing like that's not really possible. So, Becky, I was wondering if you could read a bit for us from this chapter on the six-figure lie. It's chapter 6 in the book for anyone following along. Could you just read the first 2 paragraphs of that chapter and then share anything else you want to say about the six-figure lie at that point?
Yeah. The first time I crossed 6 figures in my business, I expected the heavens to part. I expected certainty, relief, safety, maybe even a hint of arrival. In fact, nothing really changed other than getting a lot easier to be a perfect capitalist consumer. I could buy nicer things without checking my bank balance and take off on twice yearly beach vacations. But my nervous system, same wreck. My relationship to work, same anxiety. My belief that one wrong move could send it all crashing down, somehow even louder. Now there was more to protect and more to lose. The stakes got higher, but the ground beneath me stayed just as unstable. And I would say one thing about that is I think I could probably at this point change it from the 6-figure lie to the 7-figure lie, because I feel like now we've moved the goalpost so much that 6 figures is like, it hardly even feels like the thing to aspire to. But in my life at the time where I was, that was that thing, right? But yeah, it's this never ending thing. And you know, it's so funny, Amelia, because I was literally just before this at lunch with somebody talking about the book and book sales. And as the time of we're recording this, the book isn't even actually officially out yet, but it is available for purchase on my website. And I've told people, when I wrote the book, my goal, my number one and only goal, only stated goal, was I wanted to be a published author because I wanted everything else to be gravy. I'm a published author, so everything else now is gravy. And yet, because of all of this conditioning to want more and more and more, I can feel my brain doing the work it does, saying, wait a minute, but I really, why not sell 100 books or 500 books or 1,000 books or whatever, right? I can feel that finish line changing. Even when I was clear with myself what the finish line is, I've reached the finish line, I can feel good. And the same thing happens in our business with whatever that goal line is that we set when we haven't deprogrammed, talking about the deprogramming. And even after we've tried deprogramming, and because you can deprogram all you want, you go out, you breathe the air, you're breathing in more capitalism. So you got to do the work again, and then you take another breath, you got to do the work again. It doesn't end. And so, yeah, like I could hit 6 figures and suddenly it doesn't feel like quite enough. And now it needs to be, mid 6 figures, high 6 figures. Now I need to hit 7 figures. Well, and now you see people talking about 8-figure businesses and how to run it. When does it end? It doesn't. It never does. It never will. And I think that's the problem. So many people I hear are like, well, I'll do this when. I'll feel good when. If I could just get to this then. And I always want to honor that there is truth to that to a degree. We all deserve and should have our basic human needs met. None of us should have to worry about where we're sleeping. Can we eat? Can my kid get a decent education? If I get cancer tomorrow, will I be able to take care of that without losing my home, right? Okay, so absolutely. When we have enough to meet those needs, those foundational needs to keep us safe and healthy, beyond that, and studies have shown this, there isn't a more that suddenly changes how you actually feel. Your happiness level, right? How much you love yourself. Those things don't change because of all of these other measures. But we keep convincing ourselves they will. And then we hit the milestone that we thought would do it, and it doesn't. And instead of adjusting, saying, oh, maybe the milestone wasn't the problem, we just set a new milestone.
I love what you write in that same part of the book where you say, what actually changed my life wasn't money. It was unlearning the belief that I could buy my way out of fear. I began to see that no matter how much we earn, we're never safe inside a system built on precarity. 6 figures didn't change me, liberation did. And that is such a mic drop moment for me, because I feel like more than anything, honestly, starting my own business was like a deep portal through the transformation of that understanding. Like, no longer performing wage labor for a boss who didn't give a shit about me and would never give me a raise or pay me a living amount of money. Because I was not like you. I was not successful at the corporate ladder. I did not make enough money ever. I was like in grad school, a chronic under earner, and I couldn't fight my way out of that cycle. And I decided to like start my own business to try something different. And I like was able to create a little window where I had some financial space to figure that out. And then I started doing it. And then I hit this other problem that you're describing here. Then it was like, oh, it's working. Now I'm making money. Now I should just keep making more money. And then there should be more money. And then, oh, I've already hit my earning goal for this year, but I'm going to do a whole nother big launch at the end of the year just to see if I can make more money. And even this year in my business, I have intentionally decided to make less, or I've intentionally let go of the biggest revenue generating side of my business in general. And I'm still in these conversations with myself of like, okay, Amelia, are you going to do that offering over the summer just because you did it last summer and it sold well? Or are you going to actually take the summer off this year? And my partner and I have had multiple conversations where I'm like, I need you to not let me do this. I need you to hold me to. I know. But it's this balance. It's between the security and the fear, between this belief that money is security, this fear that there will never be enough of it or something will happen or the bottom will fall out over and over again. And what liberation teaches us is that it's not, or it shouldn't be, on any one of us to provide for all of our needs financially. And that, you know, I always go back to the slogan, like, we keep us safe, which is both about interactions with the police state and also about our finances, about how we provide resources for a community, how that should never lie on any one person's shoulders. And so, yeah, there's something about just the way you broke down the six-figure lie that I found really compelling. And I agree with you. It's now, what's funny to me is like now we're being sold the 7-figure or the 8-figure business. But like, I don't actually think that's because there are like suddenly so many 6-figure businesses out there that we moved the needle. I'm still seeing so many people in my world struggle to make $30,000 in their business, $50,000. I don't know all that many people who've hit the 6-figure mark within their first few years or longer. And so to me, like watching that shift happen in real time has also just been such a clue at like the lie and the lengths people will go to try to perpetuate that lie.
Well, that's true too, because I think those selling those things at some point, the 6-figure thing, they've sold it and it's become stale, and now they have to move that so that they have something new to sell, so that they can sell more and more and more to keep hitting their continued goalposts. So that is very interesting. Not to mention, you know, cost of living and things like that. I guess when a median home price is, you know, $500,000, 6 figures doesn't sound like it used to, even if it actually for most people would be incredibly meaningful.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just like, I think the gap between, you know, most people's reality and the aspiration of what they should want is just growing wider and wider. And it does not help that the prices of things are also going up and up. But like nothing about people pointing you toward a 7-figure business like meaningfully changes your current financial situation. And normally when I encounter people in the off the grid space who have gone through a lot of those types of courses or classes, like our first task is always being like, all right, my friend, we gotta pull it back. You're not going to get to a 7-figure business if you didn't figure out how to get to a 5-figure business first.
Exactly. You're not learning. Well, and because so much of it, when you actually dig into a lot of those things, so much of it is quote unquote mindset stuff that they're showing you. Because again, it is all through this privilege lens. When you see the people that are offering these, most of these are folks who are have a lot of privilege that they don't share, they don't talk about, they don't acknowledge. They don't say that it played any role in anything, and they really have convinced themselves of this sort of American dream thing of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, whatever, that they built this thing, and so if they did it, you can too, right? And so they're not teaching you fundamental anything. They're just teaching you like how to start thinking like them, as if you just start thinking like them, it'll change everything for you without any of the fundamentals of your life needing to change. When the truth is, the things that need to change are the fundamentals of your life, not the way you're thinking about them. That can be a piece, again, but it is such a small piece and is not the piece that's keeping 99.99% of people from getting to 6 or 7 or 8 figures. It's not about what they're thinking. It's about like really fundamental things. Like, do they have a savings account, right? Do they know how to actually set up a business? Do they know how to like create an offer and fulfill that offer? Like really fundamental stuff that they're not getting from those places.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like fixing your money mindset in no way like tells you how to create and market an offer, which is like more the fundamental thing needed for a business to make money.
Yeah.
And it's not that you don't need both. Like you've said, I've watched people create and market an offer, but because of their what we might call money mindset issues, it hasn't worked, or like often visibility struggles. Like there's a lot of inner work we need to do on the way to having a successful business as well. But I agree with you. It's not like the only thing to do. And for what it's worth, something that's been really helpful for me over the past few years to liberate myself and my own business is I've just stopped signing up for stuff where I can suss out that what they're teaching is like, here's how I did it. I'm going to teach you how to do it how I did it. I've really tried to break up with the I did this so you can too thing. And even though, of course, I talk about my own business and the way I do things a lot on my podcast and otherwise, I really try my best. And I'm sure someone could come with a place I haven't done this, and I'm happy to take accountability for that. But I try very hard not to teach or charge for anything that I have not seen work for many different people. And that's the way I try to stay in integrity with it, because it's like, just because it worked for me doesn't mean it'll work for anybody else. This is also a beauty of Off the Grid and like the interweb is like, it becomes a playground where a lot of us are trying different things, and I can get sort of proof of concept for a lot of different ideas. But yeah, I just think that whole like, I did this so you can too, it very rarely proves to be the case.
I mean, going back to a certain person, I won't name any names, but a gentleman who is a white man who does a lot of marketing things. And this was years ago. I wrote about him. You probably find the blog where because I was very angry, and just this whole, boiled down to the same, I did this, so can you, just start thinking this way, basically like here's the 10 habits that I have that change everything. And it's like getting up early and just all the same BS that we've seen a million times. Right. But what he doesn't talk about, because I did a little deep dive after I saw this, because I was already, like you said, my spidey senses were going up, that he may not be telling me the whole story of his life. And I found out he has 5 kids and a wife who stays at home, and more power to her. But that's quite a support system that he has going on that he's not talking about. Yeah, you can get up at 5 a.m. when you don't have to get up with the 5 kids and get their lunches ready, and you're not having to get them out the door, and you're not running them to all their things or whatever. And he also has college degrees. Many people can't say that because of a whole host of things that are systemic and go well beyond just they didn't go to college. They didn't have that opportunity. There's a privilege inside that. He came from a family, from what I understand, that was never divorced. Again, no problem with having divorced parents, but there's a lot of opportunity that can often come from having a two-parent, potentially 2-income household, and a whole bunch of things. And he's also hits every dominant. He's white, male, Christian. There was a whole host of things that cis het, that he's hitting that many other people don't have, and all the advantages that come with that. Anyway, it aggravates me so much, because when you boil it down to, if you do these 10 things, then you could have the 7-figure business that I'm running without acknowledging any of the other things. That is so deeply harmful. It's toxic. It's reinforcing the systems. And it's also giving such a permission structure to people who also look like him to continue to believe their own lies, to continue to buy into the lie that, oh, that's right, I did this all by myself. And if I'm rich, I am special and I am better. And that like, I also get really upset about the permission structure that gets baked in for people who share some of those identities and or have also, quote unquote, been self-made. Without any of that deeper examination, it's just really, really, really toxic.
Ugh, it so is. I feel myself like,
right?
I'm both like nauseated by it. I'm like, oh, so disgusting. And like, I'm like mad.
I know. Well, because we also see it all the time, and it's so infuriating. It's just so infuriating. But that's the system that we live inside, and all we can do, again, like, I can spend my time being angry, and I do, believe me. But I can also, here's the part where there is some amount of mindset, is like, I can also say, okay, that is true, and it's frustrating, and it makes me so mad, and what can I do? What are the levers that I can control in my little one small block of area here? What can I do to reject that? Because I'm not going to change him. I can get as mad as I want at him. I can point it all out, and then they don't care because they're just at a different place with their value set. So what do I do inside of my little corner of the world?
Yeah, very much so. And I think that it's incredibly important that especially folks with access and privilege in our society are thinking systemically, are acknowledging that, are accounting for that in how they work and build their businesses. And also, even if you're trying to do that work, if you don't recognize the lies of these narratives, you're going to get really wrapped up and stuck really fast. Just like you shared in your own experience, Becky, right? Like you started to understand and account for privilege, but then the narratives had to go too. And I think that is the work of it. And that's the work that you chart in the book.
The narrative is what supports the system. It's what keeps the system going. So yeah, we have to combat that. And I say that exactly as you said, fully honoring that I have been a part of it. Because I think it would be very unfair and gross for me to be like, I had it all figured out and always have. No, I've done it. I've done all the icky stuff too. And it's really important to know that you can change. Just because you've done those things doesn't mean you have to just go into a shame spiral and stay there or whatever. No, it's an invitation to change. It's an invitation to say, okay, I can do things differently now.
Yeah, the question becomes what now and what going forward, alongside the accounting for the past and the apologies where needed and the, recompense and reparations that might need to be made in that way. I've definitely seen some people recently maneuvering in our online business space where they're sort of trying to rehab their image and they claim they're doing sorts of apologies. And I'm like, I think you're just saying the same thing in different colors.
If we're seeing the same person, because I saw something very recently that had me scratching my head a little.
I would imagine so. Okay. Sorry, listeners. I'm going to be vague. I'm not trying to call anybody specific out, but it does happen. Sometimes also you see people rebrand in a way where they're claiming they've gone through these transformations. And I try in all good faith to approach that with belief that that's what they've done. But sometimes you scratch the surface a tiny bit and you're like, this is the same old, just in a different font, as the kids say. So, Becky, there's so much more I want to talk to you about in your book, which makes me really glad that we have a book club planned, because in the book club, I really want to talk to you about collaboration as rebellion, which is one of the chapters. Honestly, the thing that I probably have had the most admiration for you for the longest time is that I do not see any other business owner out there, including myself, centering interdependence and collaboration and cross-promotion to the extent that you always are. Your work in the Feminist Podcasters Collective, the way that you brought people into this book launch, every layer of your work, I always see you working with other people, breaking down the myth of the solo entrepreneur, even as you are primarily a tiny one-person business. It's so impressive and exciting to me, and I want to talk to you more about it. It's a little bit in the book too, but I really want to discuss that in our book club.
I'm excited about that because you mentioned earlier, and we didn't get to go there, but you said something very much about the ways that we make this change is we have to recognize that even when it comes to earning money, that it doesn't have to be a one-person show, and that we're meant to work collectively, because that, I have learned, is the key to everything. I'm very excited about the collective. That more than anything is what's changed my life the most radically, most recently.
What a beautiful note to end on. And yes, I think that's where we will start our conversation in the book club. So folks, if you want to hear that, just head to the show notes and RSVP. Again, it is happening live on Zoom on May 20th, I believe, at 11:30 Central, 12:30 Eastern. So it's a little kind of lunchtime book club that we're hosting. You do not have to have read the book to join us. You can just come, although I do, of course, recommend buying the book to support Becky's work. We are both self-published writers. If you do not buy our books, no one will. Not no one, but buying the book does matter, especially when you're self-published. So if you can get a copy, head to the show notes, grab your copy of Liberate Your Business. You can use the code Amelia for $5 off if you buy it from Becky's website. That will not work if you're buying from a retailer like Amazon or something else. You got to buy it directly from Becky to use the code. But grab the book, use the code, meet us at the book club. If you RSVP, you'll get the recording if you can't attend live, but we would love to see you there. And Becky, can you tell folks what is the URL? Where can they find the book and you online before we head out?
BeckyMollenkamp.com. It's right on the homepage, or /book will take you to the page. Also, just want to say, ask your library, because it's available. Libraries can request it, and I would die to see it in libraries. Like, that would light me up more than I price it as cheap as they would let you to get it into libraries. So like, I make nothing, but I don't care, that, because talk about legacy, that will live on and get so many reads. So if you can't buy it yourself, please request it from your library.
Beautiful. I love it. Yes. The library circulation for my own book as well has been such a dream. And legacy is the other thing I really wanted to talk to you about at the book club. So thank you so much, Becky, again, for making time to speak with me and for sharing your book with the world and offering Off the Grid folks a discount. We will see you all hopefully on the 20th, book in hand, ready to chat about community, collaboration, and legacy. And until then, folks, you can find us off the grid and in the clubhouse.